Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Smarter Headless Digital Experiences. My name is Alexandra Barcelona. I'm the Director of Marketing at dotCMS, and I'll be today's moderator. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered after the webinar. We'll also be doing a Q&A session at the end with our speakers, so feel free to add your questions to the panel on your screen to review at the end. Now let's dive into today's agenda. We'll start with introductions. Then we'll go into Smart Digital Ambition, Intelligent Content Foundation, Smart Experience Management, Smarter Interfaces in the Real World, and see some examples of My Planet customers. We'll follow this all by a Q&A with our speakers. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Stefan Schenkel, Enterprise Sales at dotCMS, and Michael Yonder, Head of Partner Operations at My Planet. And now I'll pass it over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone in today's webinar on smarter headless digital experiences. And we definitely want to talk about why this is so important to you and why you need to make it part of your digital agenda to pursue your digital ambition. Now, if we take it one step back, already in 2016, the World Economic Forum and Accenture stated in their research that enterprises can differentiate in two ways in the digital era, right? One, really focusing on experience rather than just the product and the services itself. And secondly, hyper-personalization. So those are two key areas where we want to focus on, right? And when you are driving customer experiences, it's crucial to cover the entire customer journey, right? Too often we see a focus on just the acquisition phase, while everything after the acquisition is equally important from a customer experience perspective at a minimum, right? I mean, bad customer service, bad quality, poor quality, and how that's handled determines if you want to stay with a brand or not. And obviously this also goes for nonprofit organizations or public services, right, where the focus is a little bit more on fundraising and services. You still have a customer journey where you want to create a certain experience. Now, technology will not be your limitation here. It's ready, it's already there. It's evolving with the speed of light, and particularly the Internet of Things is a great opportunity, and it's pushing and creating a multitude of touch points with your audiences. And obviously that's, every touch point is an opportunity for you as a brand or an organization to impact the customer experience. Now, if you look into how marketing budgets are changing, and again, this is research by Gartner, where 2017 and 2018 is compared, then you definitely see an increase in budgets for marketing technologies, right? And that's really where customer experience typically sits. Now, if you also look into what respondents consider to be the most vital marketing capabilities that they want to support delivering their marketing strategies in the next 18 months, then no surprises for us, actually. Focus on analytics, hugely important. Customer experiences are really data-driven, so the more and the better data you have, the better you can deliver a customer experience. But also the marketing technology itself, right? Hugely important. Businesses are shifting from offline to online, so having an online presence and a digital way to interact and transact with your audiences is hugely important. And then lastly, budget being allocated to customer experiences in general. So if you want to deliver smart and hyper-personalized experiences where the experience is coming to you, right, as a prospect or a customer, obviously, then this is how it typically looks or could look like, right? We've shared a similar, visual in a previous webinar when we were talking about commerce experiences, but I think it's a generic applicable architecture when you're talking about customer experiences, right? And where you have the underlying business application systems that help you to create, manage, and deliver customer experiences. Again, API first leads the way here, and for a couple of very relevant reasons, right? First of all, omnichannel experiences, right? As we mentioned, the number of touch points is increasing rapidly, so you basically want to deliver that experience anywhere. And the best way to do that is obviously over an API where the receiving endpoint can collect that data and content to expose it to your prospect or customer. Zero limitations there, maximum flexibility, hugely important. Secondly, has to be high performance. APIs can operate independently from each other, so that really helps to build scalable and high performing experiences, particularly if your platform is highly trafficked. And again, for commerce organizations, this might be relevant in a specific time of the year where there's a peak season. Performance becomes hugely important. Lastly, no code, super important for both marketers and technology teams. No code really helps to put the marketing team in the driver's seat and make them as self-sufficient as possible and independently operating from technology teams. And again, that has to be continued even if you run your content management platform as a headless CMS, right? So hugely important. That's where we offer edit mode anywhere. But conversely, for the technology teams, it also means that they can free up capacity to focus on innovation as well, right? So everybody wins in this API first play. Okay, so this is what I wanted to share with you guys. Enough from me. I would like to hand over to Michael. He's going to talk about how my planet looks at smarter interfaces, and he has some really cool examples. So Michael, please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be here for the webinar. I'm going to talk about how CMS essentially empowers smarter interfaces and how everything really ties into content management. That is why I chose the picture on the right there. And there are really four key pillars we see as being tied into a system like dotCMS 5.1. The first is around artificial intelligence. And I'm going to go into this towards the end of the deck. But essentially, this is all about getting assistive and agentive outcomes. What's an assistive outcome? Well, think of an assistive outcome as something where a user gets assistance in doing what they need to do. And the agentive outcome is where a system acts on the user's behalf and does that next best action for them. New interfaces is also a key pillar for us. I'll be talking about this in greater detail, things like voice and AR. These are all really interesting form factors that are part of the recipe in CMS. We think of CMS at My Planet as a platform that can work at scale. So again, very important to have dotCMS 5.1 power this, because essentially it enables that multimodal experience that only a headless solution can offer. And then finally, interface automation. Again, here's where we talk about the interfaces themselves that can leverage that data towards valuable outcomes. And you'll hear me say the word best next action a lot, because really that's what it's all about. So I want to look at the first grouping of smarter interfaces as voice and conversation. And I'm going to differentiate how those two words are different as we go on here. But we are seeing a lot of action in this field. Over 25% of our work right now is on voice and conversation. We have partnerships with the key platforms in this area: Amazon Alexa, Dialogflow with Google, Microsoft Bot Framework. We've done a lot of projects across these platforms, and this is also a very topical platform. This week I learned, for example, that in a recent PwC study, 71% of users really prefer, for example, voice search over key search, and 91% of CEOs, according to Adobe, really have voice on their radar. So this is a very, very topical and apropos interface to be discussing in conjunction with a CMS platform. One platform I'm going to talk about is Action. So in this case, this is a fictitious insurance company, and the user is being asked to submit a claim. Well, instead of the user having to type out the claim, the chatbot says, is it one of these claims? And if it gets smarter, it might say, is it the claim like last time you did it? So again, this is all about being highly configurable, a system that learns as it goes, and common answers to common sets of questions. Again, it makes it very, very easy, very assistive to the user to do this. And again, the content's all tied back into a headless CMS. That's what makes this example possible. But if we take that one step further, we can actually commingle voice into a conversational support tool. So here's some work we did with another partner of ours on the financial services side, the financial technology side. And here we see a similar chatbot experience. Someone loses their credit card, but now there's a voice component in the middle. And in this case, the gentleman loses his credit card. The chatbot suggests that he may have left it at a restaurant where he last was at. That chatbot then notifies the restaurant, phones the restaurant through a natural sounding voice interface. The restaurant says, we have the card, types in a key number, let's say the last 4 digits. That is in fact the card. The chatbot then goes back to the customer and says, we found your card. So this is the same sort of question and answer scenario as before, but now we have a voice play in the middle there to actually physically phone a restaurant or wherever this item might be. A real person answers the phone and says, yes, I have it. And the person's quite happy at the end. So it's taking that chatbot, that conversational interface, really to the next level. The next section of smarter interfaces I want to talk about that are powered by CMS is augmented reality and virtual reality interfaces. And before I go any further, I'll describe the difference between them. So think of augmented reality as looking at something, looking at a field of view, and something is put there that normally isn't. So it's augmenting what's in front of you naturally. Whereas virtual reality is essentially another reality altogether. And I'll explain the difference in these two examples as we go through our scenarios here. But we are a leader in this field of development. We work with the ARKit, Microsoft HoloLens, and Magic Leap 1 as examples. And the first scenario I want to talk about is augmented reality, and this is around product configuration. So in this example, we're going to be looking at product configuration, and this essentially allows a product to be seen and sensed and configured like never before. Certainly not like looking at a static, flat panel display or something in hard copy, but actually in 3D reality. And again, here the tool being used is ARKit, which is the biggest AR platform in the world. And basically what this does is it gives manufacturers a way of their prospective buyers to experience and configure, again, typically larger items in a way they'd never have. And what that does is it essentially allows the users to turn their driveway, their garage, their event space, their kitchen counter, their living room into a showroom through their mobile device. So this does not involve having to purchase any new hardware. This is simply holding up their phone, and whatever's in front of them is now a stage or a platform for a new product to be rendered. And it gives them the ability to kind of walk around, to show options, performance upgrades, packages, etc., all through their device. And again, the content is all coming through that headless CMS. So I'm going to show you this actually in real life. We have a working example here. For the sake of this webinar, it's a short loop, but it gives you a sense of what's possible. We actually configured a full-scale automobile to be sitting in our office. Of course, it wasn't there in reality, but it certainly looks like it was. The top here, you can see the beginnings of a configuration tool where you can pick some colors. But as I click this, you can see actually the full-size car in our office. You can see the light coming off the ceiling and the shadow on the floor as if it's really there. And essentially, this is showing a car that I could potentially have as if it was actually in my driveway, in this case, in our office. So it's a quick, fast loop, but again, it gives you that sense of what's possible through just looking through your phone and seeing a product. Another way this could work is in retail is through immersive endcaps. Now, we've all gone to retail stores. We've seen these displays at the end of aisles. Usually they have some sort of a promo or products on display. And what AR can be used for is really elevating this classic retail promo tactic by showing 3D versions of these products or other products in front of the shopper. So imagine getting to the end of this display and you see, in this case, there's some drills on display. Well, imagine there was a third and a fourth model of this drill that were even larger, perhaps more industrial. You point your phone at this display, and the drill would come to life as if it was literally in your hands. But this could be any large hard good. It could be a consumer good, a barbecue, anything that's large. You could move it around, you could configure it, but more importantly, you could click on that image for the best next action. So you could see options, you could see accessories, you could see colors. And then getting back into CMS, you could actually start looking at delivery and pricing options, and then click to buy. And then of course that ties into this dotCMS, and also in that particular scenario e-commerce backend, and suddenly that item is on its way to you before you even get to your car in the parking lot. So another version of Endcaps is what we call a digital endcap, and here what you're able to reproduce is this example, but where you don't actually have a true endcap. So in this particular scenario, I've got a photo of a store here. That black wall, I wouldn't really call it an end cap. It's simply an architectural feature of the store. But again, it's a space where you could put, let's say, a poster, and you would hold up your phone. It would trigger a 3D rendering of what this is. And in that scenario, the end cap would come to life in and of itself. There could be a product carousel showing different products and features. Again, all tied back into CMS. And again, here, like the last scenario, you could click and see options, you could see delivery, you could have a way of ordering. And again, this is all tied back into CMS and a commerce backend in this scenario. So again, two different ways of using AR to make retail come to life. Now we're going to talk about virtual reality, and here's where things get even more cool. So the example we have here is employee training. So here's where we do in fact put on a pair of glasses, but in this scenario, what you see is a new version of reality in front of you. So think of this scenario as being perhaps the ability to help staff learn about how to use equipment or on the job processes. And what this essentially means is that an employee can take really their training anywhere. They could wear these glasses anywhere, and suddenly they're looking out at a shop floor, at a office space, at a in a scenario where they might be working. They could tie that into testing and certification. They could have on this image not just what they're looking at by way of equipment and workspace, but also a questionnaire to the right or the left, where they'd reach out and literally poke at the air, but in their glasses, they're actually clicking on answers to a multiple choice question, for example, for a product demo or a health and safety check. The other scenario I was thinking of that I don't actually show here, but is more aimed at consumers, is around things like real estate. Imagine sending out these glasses to prospective real estate buyers. They put them on and they would see essentially the view from a condominium balcony or the inside of a home. They turn around, the view changes. Or let's say a traveler who wants to experience what a hike would look like or a city would look like, and get that unique experience. Again, all this content's tied back into CMS, but suddenly everything comes to life as if they're actually there, and it really empowers that decision making. I want to finish off by talking about a few other ideas and things we're working on. We talked about AI before and how that can be empowered. IBM Watson is one of our partners, and we've got some really cool projects around healthcare and travel that I'll show as my last slide. And we also do online product configurators too, that again are powered by content management. We did a project for New Balance where users can go on and configure shoes. Now, this may sound easy, but you can imagine the millions of combinations of perhaps 20 or 30 different styles of fabric and lace and stitching, and to have that configured online, but then have the system learn about similar configurations and serve up possible choices or configurations a user may not have thought of. So that whole idea of custom design and configuration is made possible through this. And again, all the content is stored on a CMS. The last example I want to talk about before handing it back to Stefan is around AI and how that can really elevate a personalized experience. And in this case, it's around travel. So we did a project we called a travel profiler, which used IBM's visual recognition technology. And essentially what this did was it reviewed social media feeds against defined personas, and then it made custom travel recommendations. So think of the defined personas as being, let's say, a nature lover, a beachgoer, and a camper, a city lover, and so forth. And what the system would do is it would actually scan the social media feeds of travelers and look for things like the weather in the picture, the clothing worn. Is it outside clothing? Is it winter clothing? Is it beach clothing? It would look for features in the photograph, such as forest, beach, blue sky, buildings, etc. Are they in art galleries? Are they in restaurants? Are there lots of food photographs? And essentially, it would then make recommendations based on where people have been, because as we know, travelers love posting pictures. So essentially what the system was doing was it was looking at all their pictures and saying, you look like the kind of person who would love this type of trip. Now, then the two interesting outcomes here are, one, the system gets smarter the more it's used. So for example, a music lover could potentially evolve into an outdoor concert goer because they show photographs of not just music, but being outside. So maybe the trip for them is a trip that involves an outdoor concert. The other really cool thing that happens here is that a travel company, for example, could find new correlations with this data. For example, the AI could tell them that there's a surge in sport lovers to a city that might reveal a new destination theme that wasn't previously promoted or thought of because they didn't see that correlation between a sport, a city, and a time of year. So that just gives you another example of how, again, a smarter interface, in this case powered by artificial intelligence, can serve up a very personalized experience. And again, going back to the topic of this presentation, it all is empowered by CMS. Over to you, Stefan.
Thanks a lot, Michael. This was really great, and it's always great to see these new cool applications of relatively new technologies. And I have the impression that we're only at the beginning, right? I mean, I think the more traditional interfaces, touch points like websites and applications, mobile apps will definitely stay, just like email has been here for quite a while. But I truly believe that this is only the beginning, and that we'll see much more touch points, interfaces where brands can connect with their audiences and vice versa. By the way, what is the coolest interface that you have seen recently, if you mind asking me?
Certainly. I would say, going back to that example of the virtual reality interface and immersing yourself in a workplace and you're actually standing in front, or appear to be standing in front of a big piece of machinery you've got to learn, but you're sitting actually in your home office or another location or an airport waiting lounge. That's pretty cool. The voice interfaces, I think, are very cool, Stefan, especially the natural sounding voice interfaces are getting so clever in how they're rendered, where they're just human enough to make a conversation and sound natural.
Yeah. How natural is natural sounding voice in your opinion? I mean, I think a lot of people have seen that YouTube video when I think they just launched it. But what's your take on that? On how natural it is?
Sure. So our audience at the end of the webinar could check out Google Duplex. It was announced last May, but it's essentially a voice interface that features things like that we always use, whether we want to or not, which are ums and ahs and natural pauses in our dialogue flow, even when
Yeah.
we're not doing webinars. And that's how we talk. And the solution renders that and allows for those pauses when engaging examples like in the lost credit card scenario. And when the person's listening on the phone, it's a very natural sounding dialogue for them to want to help. They're not talking to a robot necessarily. Well, I mean, they are technically, but they're encouraged by the way it sounds to want to help and to want to engage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no, I couldn't agree more. And you guys are really, focused on smarter interfaces, right? Is it fair to say that it's My Planet's core business? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
And when organizations get inspired by this and they want to take the next step with smarter interfaces, what are the typical areas that you guys see that they're struggling with when they get started?
That's a good question. And that could be a whole nother webinar to some level, but I guess dipping your toe into anything new, there's the fear of not knowing what you don't know. That would be the first thing. So I don't even know where to start. What is my strategy? If someone says I need a voice strategy, well, what are the components of a voice strategy, to start with? And then what is my strategy thereafter? So that's certainly one area. Another is like any new strategy we see, getting buy-in and making the case for the smarter interface strategy. We always like to know that there's a stakeholder somewhere in a project on the client side that is being kept up at night by something that is bothering them. And when you have that stakeholder that literally is thinking about this outcome as a problem or something that can be improved upon, that is where a smarter interface project really starts to sing. When there isn't that person and it's simply a pet project or something they want to get around to sometime, that becomes a struggle, as I'm sure you've seen as well in your business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and actually, we see the same with for a number of years in the content management space, right? Although personalization is getting more commoditized, you still see people that when they're selecting and evaluating CMSs, they're pretty adamant about having personalization and content targeting capabilities while they're not ready for it. Right, they don't have a strategy around personalization from a marketing perspective. So then you end up with the CMS that has the capabilities, but your whole organization and your marketing strategy is non-existing. So we definitely see that, and you also see that with artificial intelligence, obviously, which I think is really in an early stage. And then I mean artificial intelligence applied into the world of content management, right? So really that curation and content management process. It's obviously already applied in personalization, and particularly in the retail space where you can, browse through products and search. That's absolutely already maturing as a technology, but in the core content management process, not so much. So we definitely see similarities there, and most people just simply want to re-platform and move off their legacy technology and basically build a foundation for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So they obviously still have enough time to start developing those strategies. How long would it take, going back to the smarter interfaces, how long would it take to develop an AR experience? What is your experience with that?
The smart smart agency person in me will say, well, that all depends on your scope and requirements for that to be safe. But you know, honestly, because we've got people on the call are going to say, you said it would take 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's recorded.
You know, it can actually take a few weeks to do the rendering. The part you saw of that car, I mean, it's not, the toolkit's very robust, and it's very easy to render this stuff and to make it work and behave in a certain way. The longer time is really the upfront strategy. What is it you want to render? What is the personalization strategy? What market are you going after? What's the next best action? But the actual, I guess, the handiwork involved, putting together the imagery you see, it can be done quite literally in a few weeks. The visuals, the broader piece obviously is what are you going to show? What's a greater strategy, which is always done, of course, beforehand.
Great. Yeah. Do you guys proof of concepts as well before customers want to commit to a specific interface or technology?
Certainly. I mean, anything you saw, anything our guests today have seen in our webinar, if they want to start slowly and say, we have something in mind where we want to try for this product or this market or this site, because we have many sites. We've often done proof of concepts, and they yield a proof point for a bigger project. So that's certainly something we're open to.
Right. No, that's good to know. I mean, we're huge fans of proof of concepts, right? I mean, even in our more traditional technology, like, you know, content management, I mean, it's pretty commoditized. And as you know, we see that as really a very elegant tactic to support the CMS evaluation process, right? Because, you know, you typically tend to stick to 5 to 10 years. So you don't want to replace your CMS every year or every other year. That's a huge endeavor. So it really makes sense to spend the right amount of time on the evaluation to make that decision. And then that's where POCs are very helpful for customers. So I definitely would love to do a POC with some of these technologies and dotCMS. So if there's an opportunity, I know who to call, Michael.
Yeah, and also I'll add, depending on the opportunity, we'd even help fund it. So there's some incentive there.
Well, there you go. Well, that's a call out to all the customers, prospects that are out there. And you are recorded, Michael, so we'll keep you honest. And speaking about replatforming and migration, right? So how does the adoption of smarter interfaces compare to traditional interfaces like websites and mobile apps? And with adoption, I mean not only I mean the implementation, plus also the internal adoption by end users and potentially developers. What are the typical numbers or aspects that you see there?
Sure. So, I mean, if we think of the past, and, you know, one scenario you've just described is the migration from desktop to mobile web. You know, this was two lines that eventually crossed, and now they're in the rear view mirror. So there's definitely been an adoption to taking in content through mobile. And we saw that coming, it happened, and now it's the way people do things. And we see smarter interfaces in a similar way. And if I go back to sort of the voice interface, which is what I was highlighting earlier, I did mention that Adobe study, and it's available online. It was done this year, actually, just to play that out a bit more. You know, what was interesting to me when you look at things like adoption is one of the findings was that only 10% surveyed were not familiar with voice interfaces, meaning 90% were and knew what they were all about. And so that's a big step towards having a positive adoption to a smart interface. And then when you kind of dug a little deeper and you sort of see, well, what were some of the top score items within voice? Well, voice via mobile was certainly one of the top score items. In other words, using your phone, using a voice interface on your phone to then do something. And when it came to the do something part, one area of highest adoption was around search. That was the highest use case in this study, with essentially only 11% not using voice to search.
Yeah.
And when you think of then searching, well, what are some of the things people are searching for? What are some of the use cases where people have adopted search to do things? And again, this Adobe study was quoting things like food and groceries as being some of the top items where it's done through mobile, it's done through voice, and essentially, hey, I'm hungry, I need some takeout or whatever it might be, or add a dozen apples to my last grocery order. These are areas where we're seeing some of the highest adoption, and studies seem to back it up.
Great. No, that's very helpful. I definitely will look into this Adobe study for sure. Yeah, I would like to wrap up this fireside for now. Michael, I want to see if we have some questions from the audience, and I have one question here about stakeholders. What type of people do you see as key stakeholders on the client side to make this strategy happen? Good question.
Yeah, so going back to the question around what are some of the areas organizations will struggle with, and I mentioned that person being kept up at night because there's a problem. Yeah. Let's look at that person as a stakeholder. So where do they reside in the organization? So the typical people we see as stakeholders on the client side are in things like retail leadership roles. So some of the retail examples I gave you, these would be people obviously who have leadership within retail. So for example, a bank has a retail arm. People in that department. Retailers themselves, of course, have leadership. The second group of stakeholders would be people who are tasked with strategy within the company. They're being asked by their C-suite, what's our voice strategy? Okay, I guess I better find one. What's our conversational interface strategy? I mean, these people read these studies on airplanes and in their downtime, and they come to the office with questions. So the strategy people are certainly stakeholders. And then the third stakeholders would be people on the innovation side, product development teams, skunkworks teams. These are people that are tasked to develop and build products and to innovate within a company. They are always looking for the next way to do what they do. And definitely if they see something they like or don't like, they can make it very easy or challenging for a smarter interface play to see the light of day.
Yeah, that great, thank you. And that actually triggered a question I had as well. I mean, you talk a lot about best next action. Can you tell a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. So I've mentioned it a few times, and it comes right back to personalization, which you sort of started off our discussion with. So anytime you personalize a experience, the desired outcome is for somebody to do the thing next that makes the most sense for them and you. And so we kind of talk about best next action because essentially once someone has seen content or some sort of a proposition through one type of interface or another, there is something they want to do next or something they should do next if the system is working correctly. And that could be to purchase, to go to look at more content, to opt in to see a webinar, to reach out to a sales rep, to go to a conference, or to not do anything at all if they're not qualified. Yeah. And if the next action is not the best action, then essentially you're just gumming up the system, as I like to put it simply. You've got people who are confused. They're, if I go on to a site and I'm looking at, one type of a product and I go back to that site and that site doesn't remember me from the last time I was there, my next action might not be to go to that site again. If I go back to the site and I see where I left off, or it's showing me now content related to the fact that I was searching for product A, not product B, my next action is a lot better because now I'm inquiring more, perhaps buying that product. So that is the ultimate goal, is no matter who's looking at this content and all they've seen, and the examples we've showed today, they're all gonna have the best way forward to do something next, the right on-ramp or off-ramp, off the highway, so to speak. And that is what it's all about.
Great. No, thanks for clarifying that. I got one more question from the audience. Do you think that smarter faces supplement more traditional interfaces like web and mobile apps, or that some of these traditional touch points will be substituted with smart ones? Interesting.
Yeah, I think of those platforms as enabling smart interfaces. I mean, as you saw earlier, a lot of these smart interfaces run off of mobile. I mean, the AR configurator was looking through your phone. That Mercedes sedan was viewed through an iPhone. The immersive and digital Endcaps is through your mobile device. Voice or a conversational chatbot, such as the one for that insurance company, where it's saying, would you like to submit another dental claim, which is a best next action example, could be through desktop. So these are all means to an end. I wouldn't say it eliminates any of them, but rather those interfaces enable the smarter action that might happen next.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, this actually we've run out of questions. No more questions from the audience. So yeah, I think we should wrap up, Michael. I really enjoyed this topic and doing this together with you, and I certainly look forward to work with My Planet on smarter interfaces, do a POC or what have you, or just do a webinar on a different topic that's close to both our hearts. But in any case, again, I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution today, and I also would like to thank everybody else on the call, and have a great day.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.